So we'll begin Perek Men Bet, chapter 42 in the Tanya. A lot of people have mentioned to me and to other rabbis that perhaps it's not such a good idea to instill fear in people, to teach them, to communicate to them about Hashem in a way that instills fear in them. Do it through love, do it through some other way, through some logical way. But they're mistaken. There is a need for fear. There is a certain need for this element of fear in people. Just like we have the need to have fear of the law. A child has to have a certain degree of fear of his parent. This does not mean that this is the way the parent needs to deal with the child, only through fear. But the element of fear is of great necessity. It's there for a reason. In this book, in the Sefer Tanya, one realizes that in order to make a connection with Hashem, in order to properly serve Him, which is ultimately the goal for every Jew, it has to begin somewhere. It has to have a momentum to continue to drive it and to further develop it. A Jew cannot remain on the same level that he was when he was a child. As he grows and as he matures, hopefully, his perception of godliness will also become stronger. And as a result of that, his fear and love for Hashem will mature. As we said before, the fear and love for Hashem comes in different levels. Here we're not talking about a fear of Gehenom, as some people might think. Oh, you're threatening him with being punished. Hashem loves all of His creations, and it's not so much about punishment. It's not that we fear Him because of the consequences in the afterlife. We're dealing with a connection. We want to have a strong connection with Him, and there needs to be an understanding, as much as we can grasp, of what Hashem is, what He expects of us. And the fear is to help us respect Him, to help us do His will, to help us serve Him. And as we've seen in the previous chapters, Yirat Hashem is really a condition for Avodat Hashem, for the service of Hashem. In order to properly serve Hashem, it needs to be there. Otherwise, this individual may be doing things out of habit. This is part of his tradition. It's not representative of his relationship with Hashem. He doesn't think of Hashem. He's not fully aware of what Hashem wants of him. He's just doing it out of habit. This is his tradition. But if one is really focused and is really interested in Avodat Hashem, in realizing that this is the most important achievement in his life, that if he serves Hashem by complying with His laws, by fulfilling, observing the mitzvot, if he realizes the importance of that, then obviously he will do whatever it takes to succeed. So Yirat Hashem, the fear of Hashem, is definitely not only a condition, it is a way of preparing oneself to Avodat Hashem. We have seen it throughout the chapters in the Tanya that every individual is really capable of Yirat Hashem. There are different levels of neshamot, there are different levels of souls. Some feel it and experience the Yirat Hashem and the Ahavat Hashem, love Hashem a lot more than others. And he's briefly going to touch on this in this parak as well, why this happens, why some people have to work a lot harder than others. Nonetheless, it is very clear, and he emphasizes it again over here in this parak, that these kinds of thoughts, the thoughts of Yirat Hashem, Ahavat Hashem, which come about partially through Hidbonenut, through meditating on the greatness of Hashem, this will help. This definitely helps one come closer to achieving Yirat Hashem. Once a person has a certain level of Yirat Hashem, this will help him with the study of the Torah and with the observance of the mitzvot. It doesn't mean that without Yirat Hashem one will not do any mitzvah. Yes, of course, he still may be able to do the mitzvot, he still may be able to learn Torah, but there's no guarantee that the momentum will remain there, that he will be committed to it on a daily basis, that he will enjoy it, appreciate it, He may just do it out of habit, or because he's being forced to do it. You know, as a child, he's forced by a parent to go to school. We want this child to do something on his own when he grows up. That he should not be feeling that he's forced to do it. This is what his parents expect of him. That he's ashamed in public if he were not to comply with a certain mitzvah. That he will be labeled as an outcast. That's no good. The ultimate goal is for the Jew to do it on his own, because he wants to do it, because he understands the importance of it. And obviously this doesn't happen overnight. This requires a certain amount of preparation and clarity of purpose. What is life all about? And this cannot happen without learning Torah. So here, we're not just learning about the importance of Torah. We're talking here about a very important condition that needs to be there in order for there ever to be the momentum that is required for the service of Hashem to continue. We're talking about the service of Hashem. Service of Hashem involving aseh and lo ta'aseh, in positive commandments and negative commandments. To do that which is expected of me, and to hold myself back and to abstain from that which I'm not allowed to do. That is critical. Obviously, learning Torah is very important, because without learning Torah, one does not have the knowledge. One is really missing out on life. One cannot really fully grow and mature without Torah. But here we're more emphasizing the basic fundamental requirements of Avodat Hashem. True Avodat Hashem needs to involve Yirah and Ahava. They will prepare him, and they will give him the strength to continue when he's on his own, as a father, as an adult, to want to do these things, not because he's forced to do it. All of this that we call fear of Hashem, that we just described, is really a low-level fear, which he's been talking about. Yir'at ta'ah. A low-level fear. What's a low-level fear? Hashem watches. Hashem knows. Hashem examines and knows exactly what is going on in my mind. I can't fake it. This is a low-level fear. That there's a certain awareness that Hashem did not only create the world, which is emunah, which is faith, but he continues to oversee it. Not only does he oversee it, he knows exactly what is going on in every human being's mind. He's aware of everything. And obviously this kind of awareness for us is very, very significant, because if one does not have this minimal awareness that Hashem knows everything, that Hashem examines our heart, then he's really going to be very, very distant, very, very far from doing anything with interest to do the will of Hashem. Because who says Hashem is listening? Who says Hashem cares? This is really one of the principles of the Jewish faith, that Hashem is therefore aware, is involved in this world. He did not just create the world and leave the scene. He's completely involved in every detail. He's aware of everything, even of our thoughts. Obviously, deeds are more important than just thoughts, but a deed begins somewhere. It begins with one's thoughts. And if one's thoughts are not focused in the service of Hashem, if there's really no interest there because of a lack of belief, or the belief is not strong enough, then it's going to be a watered-down religion. Unfortunately, throughout history, we've had many rebels, you can call them renegades, those that turned away from Judaism. Because of the circumstances, we're not here to judge them. It's because of the circumstances. Nonetheless, it would not have happened had they had stronger and deeper roots, had their parents been more devoted to it. Then the children would have had a better chance that they would remain with it. But if they did not see the self-sacrifice, the devotion in their parents, then can we expect of them to be stronger than their parents just because they're Jewish, just because they see it in others? It all depends on the soul, as we will see. It depends on the neshama, it depends on the upbringing, it depends on the school, on the friends, and the environment. Jewish people have suffered in the galut, in the diaspora, under all kinds of situations, tremendous challenges and pressures. So we can never judge anyone. You don't know how you would deal if you were in his shoes. But still, we need to explain it, that if a Jew was once upon a time observant and he dropped it, obviously the Yirat Shamayim is not strong enough. had the fear of heaven been there all along from the very beginning, and it was strong, you would have had a better chance. It's not a guarantee, by the way. You can have very, very righteous people for many years, and in their later years, somehow they cooled off. It could happen. We're only human. Mistakes happen. There is a Yetzer Hara, evil inclination, who doesn't let go until the last day. That is where we have teshuvah. What's the whole idea of Yom Kippur and teshuvah? Because mistakes happen. Husband and wife, mistakes happen between them too. But it's up to them to do teshuvah and to say, I'm sorry. It requires a certain awareness of the importance of marriage, of the relationship. What are we doing here? We're just raising children? Or is there more to this? So for a Jew, it's not just about bringing children to the world. It's about building a Jewish home, a sanctuary for Hashem, continuing to transmit the tradition to a future generation. Tremendous responsibility. It's called awareness. Awareness of the meaning or purpose of life. So Avodat Hashem requires this minimal awareness called Yir'at Ta'ah, a lower level Yir'ah, that without it, he or she does not have the basic preparation that they need to serve Hashem. And even if they do it, it may cool off later on. So we need chizukim, even though he doesn't speak about chizukim in this chapter. Chizukim meaning continuous encouragement and stimulants in order to stay strong. Otherwise, there's something called burnout in religion too, maybe. Maybe there's a different name for it. You know what I mean by burnout in work. So you need to be stimulated, excited to go to work. How many people are excited to go to work every morning? Well, if they love their job, maybe. A lot of people are not really excited about their job. So here we're talking about the most important job of all, the service of Hashem. God forbid, if a Jew cools off, if he's not excited, it's terrible. So anyway, in order to be able to do the service of Hashem, to be Oved Hashem, one has to have a certain level of yirah, of fear. Now, in this chapter, he goes on to explain as follows. This low level of yirah that we've been speaking about is really what the Gemara had in mind. The Gemara says something very interesting. He mentions here the Gemara that says, Ma Hashem shoel mi'imach, famous verse that Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people. After all, what is Hashem asking of you? What is he asking of you? The world? No. Ki milira et Hashem. Just fear him. He's not asking too much of you. So the way Moshe phrases it, it appears like it's no big deal. So the Gemara says, Atu yira milta zitratahi. Is really Yirat Hashem something so minor, something so easy, something so small? So the Gemara says, you know what? For Moshe Rabbeinu it is. So the Tanya, the author of the Tanya, asks, well, wait a minute, what kind of an answer is that? We're talking about the Jewish people who he's addressing. To them, Yirat Hashem is definitely no minor achievement. It's a big achievement. It's not something so easy. So what kind of an answer is it that for Moshe it is? You understand the question? The Gemara says about this Yirat Hashem that Moshe is telling them that this is so significant, that this is what Hashem wants of you. And he says it in a way that it's no big deal. Is it really no big deal? So the Gemara says, yeah, for Moshe it's no big deal. Well, what do you mean for Moshe? We're talking about for the Jewish people. Is it a big deal? Is it something difficult or not? So the answer of the Gemara is somewhat difficult to understand. So the Tanya here gives us a completely, I guess we can call it a revolutionary explanation as to what the Gemara really is implying here. It is more Kabbalistic. It is not a simple explanation of what the Gemara says. What the Gemara basically says, yes, this is something that is accessible. And that is why the Torah, why Moshe Rabbeinu tells us, listen, it was lo b'shamayim hi. It's not in heaven. As he says later on, don't think that this is something that you have to work very, very hard to attain. It's accessible, it's reachable, it's not too distant from you. But here on a Kabbalistic level, he explains as follows. every soul, every Jewish soul, has an aspect of the soul of Moshe. So when the Gemara says, for Moshe, it's not a big deal, it's not just talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. On a Kabbalistic level, it's talking about an aspect of the soul of Moshe that every Jew has. Kol nefesh b'Yisrael says, yesh ba b'chinat Moshe. Every nefesh has something, some aspect, some quality of the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. Who's this Moshe Rabbeinu? Why is he so special? He is one of the 7 shepherds. Chad mishiv'at haro'im. Right? Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David. Right? 7 shepherds. What are the 7 shepherds all about? They have a very special neshama, very big neshama. And they impart onto the world, onto the neshamot of Israel, a certain aspect of their soul. That's all that we need to know right now. Each one represents a different quality. Abraham, for example, chesed. So we all have some aspect of the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu that imparts, this soul of Moshe Rabbeinu imparts on Klalut Israel, on all of Am Israel, a certain quality of his neshama. Now, why Moshe Rabbeinu, of all the shepherds? In other words, why does he impart on us what he has? Because he has within him klalut, all the aspects of all of the roim. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu has within his neshama a little bit of everything, I guess you could say. And therefore it is he who imparts on us an aspect directly to our nefashot. Therefore he's called Ra'ya Mehemna, the trusted shepherd, as he explains, because he imparts on us the aspect of da'at, knowledge, Lechlalut Israel, for all of the Jewish people, Leida'at Hashem, to know Hashem. Now this knowledge of Hashem depends on the level of the neshama of the individual, how much it nourishes from the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, according to its root, the root of the soul. In other words, every neshama nourishes or receives a different level or different amount of da'at or ability to have this da'at. This da'at, where does it come from? This da'at is mushreshet, he says, it's rooted in the da'at elyon, in the supernal knowledge, which is in the 10 sefirot of Atzilut, as he explains, hamiyuchadot b'ma'atzilan, which are really united with from where they emanate from Hashem. Because after all, hu v'da'ato echad, after all, he and his knowledge are all one. So everything emanates from him, everything originates from him, and is imparted to us. For what reason? So that we should be able to feel or know on a certain level Hashem. We don't see him, but we can experience him. We can perceive him. This is the difference between knowing and perceiving. Even though in the end we're supposed to know, what this knowing means is not knowing like you know something in a book that you read. As we will soon see, knowledge in Lashon HaKodesh, in the Hebrew language, means to be connected to something. Lada'at oto means to make it a part of you, to internalize it. So, through the neshama of Moshe, according to the level of the soul, we're able to have this da'at that enables us to connect to Hashem on a certain level. In other words, that we're able to know of him and experience him through this da'at. So through this da'at that is revealed in us, we're able to perceive Elokut, divinity, in a way that we can actually feel it as though this is really something real. Because the physical body cannot see it, but it's as a result of our neshama, and that quality or that aspect of da'at that we have, that enables us to perceive and to feel, to know that Hashem is above us, that Hashem knows of us, knows of our deeds, and continuously oversees us. And from this knowledge, from this perception, we are able to develop Yirah, the fear. So Yirah doesn't just come about by itself. It doesn't just pop up there. Fear of heaven. There's a certain awareness, there's a certain perception which comes from, or is derived from that, a certain knowledge of Hashem that the soul has, the soul received, in order to, on its own, figure out things and be able to experience that which is spiritual in nature. We have a physical body. How can we experience something spiritual? And I've given you perhaps various examples in the past of a spiritual experience, of even those who are very distant from Judaism. And one example is, imagine a Jew who doesn't know anything about Judaism, for the first time in his life going to the Kotel HaMaravi, to the Western Wall, and as soon as he approaches the wall, he bursts in tears. As people look at him, did something happen to you? Did anybody hurt you? Why did you all of a sudden cry? Because you saw this wall? Something in his neshama at that moment awakened. That's a spiritual experience. People have had a lot of spiritual experience. Doesn't make a difference whether you're Jewish or not. There's something spiritual in us that is moved to tears because of what it experiences. So here we're talking about a certain level, a certain aspect of that enables us to have this awareness of Hashem, that He knows what is going on in our life, examines our deeds, is aware of everything we do. And this is important because it leads to Yirah. It leads to the fear of Hashem. What's interesting is what he says next. This is interesting too, but what's more interesting is a certain idea that he mentions briefly about Nitzotzot of Moshe. We just spoke about a certain aspect of the soul of Moshe that every nefesh has. Well, there's something else called Nitzotzot, the sparks of the soul of Moshe. There are sparks of this soul present in every generation as well. Now this is a topic for another time. What exactly is the spark of a soul? I think I mentioned that briefly when we talked about reincarnation. Gilgulei Neshamot. There you may have a little bit of more of an elaboration of what a nitzot of a soul is versus a whole soul. What's the difference between nefesh, ruach, and neshama, chaya, and yechidah, the various levels of the soul. So there's something called a spark of a soul. The best way, I guess, to understand it is a spark is not the entire soul. It's just a part of it. A part of it that can come down into this world. And here we're talking about someone else's spark, the spark of Moshe, that comes down into the world, into certain individuals who are the leaders of Am Yisrael, the teachers and the Chachamim, because they need the spark of Moshe to be able to teach properly, that is, the da'at of Hashem, the knowledge of Hashem. And by imparting this teaching to Am Yisrael, they will know the greatness of Hashem, and they will be able to serve Him wholeheartedly. Why is that so important? In this case, as we said before, without that you cannot really have complete Avodat Hashem. In Avodah Shebalev, the service of the heart really depends on how much da'at a person has. The more da'at, the more knowledge he has of Hashem, the greater, the more intense the service of Hashem will be. As it says, he mentions the pasuk, Da'at Elokei Avicha ve'ovdeu belev shalem. It was, know your God and serve Him with a complete heart. That is in this world. What will happen when Mashiach comes? It says in the future, the pasuk says, the verse says, V'lo yalamedu ish et re'o lemor de'ut Hashem. One will not have to tell another, come and learn how to know Hashem. Ki kulam yed'u oti. The Nabi says, the prophet says, they will all know me. There will be no barriers in When Mashiach comes, there will be no Yetzer Hara, evil inclination. There will be no obstacles, no challenges. It will be so clear. And we're getting there very, very soon. Well, everybody will know. Everybody who's around, who's still in existence, will know this on their own. There won't really be that need to figure things out. Today, however, he says we still need those nitzotzot of Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the one that imparts this da'at through his spark to the leaders and teachers of Am Yisrael. So the sparks are in the leaders, the teachers, the Talmidei Chachamim, but the aspect of the neshama of Moshe, a certain part of the light of his soul, is present in every Jew. So there's a light or an aspect or a certain quality of his neshama in all the nefashot, and then there is the actual nitzotz, the spark, that the leaders in the Chachamim of Am Yisrael have. Then he goes on to say, but don't think that this knowledge is important in the same way that knowledge is from an encyclopedia. That you learn something, you know it, you memorize it. That which is known from, he says, from Sofrim and Sfarim, that which is known from writers and books, is not the knowledge that we're talking about. Well, when we talk about that, what do we really mean? It says, the main thing about that of Hashem is le'amik b'gdulat Hashem, is to deepen our thoughts in the greatness of Hashem, litkoa machshavto, in other words, to immerse ourselves in our thoughts very much in Hashem, bechozek ve'ometz halev ve'amoch. One has to make great efforts to meditate, to think about the greatness of Hashem, how He runs the world, how He created all of this, how everything is beautiful, how everything is in harmony. To analyze this, to think about this, until his thoughts become connected to Hashem b'kesher amitz, in a very, very strong connection, that to him it's so obvious and clear. You know, I have seen this many, many times, that you have people who are observant, religious Jews, but I would not say they have a kesher amitz, that they have a strong connection with Hashem. What does that mean? They're observant. They do everything. They're kosher, 100%. But their thoughts are not connected with Hashem in such a way that everything they hear or everything they see, they think it's just, oh, a coincidence, or it's random, or they give it some political explanation. It shows how far they're removed from that, from the proper outlook that says Hashem is responsible for everything that you see. So much so, the Chasidut really gets into it, the Baal Shem Tov. You're going in the street, and you heard something, somebody talking. You know that you had to hear that for some reason. Whether this made a difference to you or not is not really important right now. The fact that we hear things, even though we didn't intend to, we just walked by the street, it was meant to be. People are not sensitive enough to think that way. Something happens in North Korea. It's not just by chance, it's not just because of political reasons, it's Om Shamayim. For people's mindset, for a Jew's mindset, to be completely in tune with Hashem, he has to understand that Hashem is the boss and that everything comes from Him. His mind and his thoughts have to be continuously connected, b'kesher amitz, to Hashem. People get married. How did it happen? Oh, they met in somewhere, or there was a shatkan, some matter. No. Hashem made it happen. Why aren't you giving credit to Hashem? Of course He has messengers. It was because of her help, his help, this phone call. Yes, but don't take away the credit from the one who really brought it together. Why don't people react that way and say that and express that? Because they're not really connected. So they're giving other kinds of explanations to what happens with them in their life. You know, people trip, they hurt their finger. Whatever, somebody embarrassed them. Even though the one who embarrasses is committing a big sin, it's still Nashamayim. Hashem let it happen. That means maybe I deserve that. I needed to experience that pain. Maybe Hashem was testing me how I will react to it. Will I be upset, complain? get mad, do something. We don't know. We don't know the reasons for everything, but Hashem is aware. Hashem is involved. Hashem examines our thoughts. Hashem tests us. So all of this depends on how strong the kesher is, the connection with Hashem. So he says like this, in order for us to be able to have that connection, one has to immerse himself, make an extra effort, strong effort, with his mind and his heart, until his thoughts are connected to Hashem in the same way that his thoughts would be connected to something physical. People are so in love sometimes with something or with another human being that they're really into it, and that's something physical. It says, be as much connected to Hashem as you are with that which you're very connected physically, whatever it may be. May you have that same strong connection that you really don't take your mind away from it. And these things are normal for people to have, whether it's another human being that they're very much into, or whether they're into money, as he's going to explain right now soon. That's the best example of people, how people pursue money. They're willing to go overseas and work so hard, take 2 jobs. They're willing to do so much because their mind is making money, making it big, as they say in English, being successful. Haven't you seen those long lines that people go to sleep even next to the store? What is it, before Thanksgiving or before some of those holidays? Is it called Black Friday?
Black Friday, yeah.
Why not Red Friday? Huh? Black. I guess it's a little bit depressing.
Yeah.
No, who knows? But anyway, the point, look what people are willing to do, to do what? To get a gadget, some gadget, the latest gadget, for some cheaper price. You know, they have to be they have to be the first. Something that's so physical, something that's so insignificant, but that's what their life is all about. That's all what they care about. And you have a lot of people that care about really silly things, and that's what he's saying here. You know, use that as an example. Be connected in such a strong way, in the same way you would to Hashem, in the same way you would be to that which is physical. Sometimes people are very connected to them. That, he says, after all, is a connection. Knowledge is not just knowing things, it's being connected to them. As it says, V'adam yada et ishto. First man knew his wife intimately. That intimate connection is a form of knowledge. He knew her. They were intimate. They became one. So here too, this knowledge is internalized. It becomes a part of us. It's not just to know raw knowledge and do nothing about it, do nothing with it, but to implement that which we know, to make it a part of our life. So he says this ability, in this midah, this characteristic of being able to connect our da'at to Hashem, every nefesh of Israel has it, from that which we nourish for the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. So what happens? Why aren't people serving Hashem altogether? In other words, the way it should be. It says it's only because the nefesh nitlapsha beguf. It's only because she got dressed up in the physical body that, as a result of that, it needs to really work hard. Because otherwise, think about it. If we have it naturally, then why doesn't it come easy to us? Why don't we just connect? Why don't we undrawn to it? Just like magnets. You know, magnets, they have a certain koach, certain power to draw. The neshama has that power, but we don't see it always. It requires work, but that's what he's talking about now. Why should it require work? That's what he's talking about. You know, it was in saying that somehow we need to work hard for it, but why? Why shouldn't it just come naturally? Well, this nefesh happens to have been dressed up in a physical body, and as a result of being dressed up in that which is physical, we need hard work. We need to labor hard in order to connect to Hashem. So you need to work so much, kfula umechupelet. In other words, our efforts have to be doubled many, many times over. Why? Because that soul is in a physical body. Now, what kind of effort do we need to make? 2 kinds of effort, he says. One effort, and the reason why you need so much effort is because one effort is for the guf, for the physical body, you want to humble it. You want to humble the flesh so that the flesh, the physical, does not get in the way and darken the light of the neshama. A person who has a lot of desires, he pursues worldly things, he's not giving his neshama a fair chance. It's making it much more difficult for the neshama to express itself what it wants. So you have to be careful not to overemphasize materialism. Otherwise, you're diminishing the light, getting in the way of that light. So therefore, one needs yegi'ah, needs a lot of effort to humble that guf. How? Through hirurei teshuvah. One way is through continuous thoughts of teshuvah. As the Zohar says, we saw this in the past, if the light of the neshama cannot penetrate the body, but shinlei, you crush it. You crush the body. In other words, you somehow humble it in such a way that it should not be craving after all that which is physical. We want to let the or, the light of the neshama, get through. It's there, but it doesn't get through. It's being blocked. You have to somehow crush that physical body. How do you crush it? By thoughts of teshuvah. Imagine they tell someone, you have only a few days to live. I think that's very humbling. Because I don't think he's going to ask for a Lexus, or he's not going to be thinking about remodeling his home if all he has is a few days to live. We spoke about that before. He's about to leave. Why should he care about these things? Doesn't make any sense that he should want those things. So hirurei teshuvah, thoughts of teshuvah, is hopefully what will take to neutralize, to dampen the physicality in the individual. But who thinks about teshuvah every day? Once a year, maybe. Rosh Hashanah, Kippur. So what are we talking about here? Hirurei teshuvah on a regular basis? Yes, that is why the Chachamim composed in our prayers several prayers that deal with teshuvah. Whether it's Slach Lanu Avinu in the middle of the Amidah, whether it's Ana after the Amidah. It's interspersed everywhere, teshuvah. Because in the end, what are we trying to accomplish? To connect to Hashem, and we realize that there's certain barriers. The sins are barriers. We won't be able to connect if the barriers are still there. So here, we're not talking about so much about the barriers, we're talking about making sure that this physical body is not too much into the physical world. And in order to neutralize it, you need to crush it through thoughts of teshuvah. What's the second effort all about? The second effort requires effort for the nefesh itself. The nefesh is spiritual, but we don't want the nefesh to be overworked and feel overloaded, overwhelmed by all this avodat Hashem, all these mitzvot that are occupying its mind. So what do? We tell her, listen, you got to think of Hashem. You got to immerse yourself in thought and meditate on the greatness of Hashem. Sha'ah gdola retzufa, he says, an entire long hour. Is really give it some thought on a regular basis. Give it time. Because otherwise, what we said before will happen. People will cool off. This is too heavy. This is too much. I'll just do it for 5 minutes and not more. Prayer, take prayer. Prayer takes, if you want to really pray properly, it can take you 40, 45 minutes, the morning prayer. Some people rush through it. Well, they're in a hurry. What a shame, what a loss. I'm not even talking about not understanding what they're saying, lack of kavanah, but it shows that one does not really connect to the prayer. In order to pray properly, one has to realize he's standing right now before the king. You're now standing before the king, you're talking to him. You're actually talking to him. And he's listening. Focus on the words you're going to say. Be choosy on how you're going to say it, how you're going to communicate. So this is a necessity for one to think for a certain amount of time on a regular basis about the greatness of Hashem and how He oversees the world, how He created everything. But does everybody need the same amount of time? The answer is no. He goes on to say that this shi'ur sha'ah, this hour, eno shaveh b'kol nefesh. It's not the same for everyone. This hour is not equal for everyone. Why? Well, it says, yesh nefesh zakah b'tiv'ah. There are some refined souls, naturally refined. Good kids came into the world pure souls. There are such souls. There are therefore individuals whose nefesh is purer. And as a result of that, they don't need that much work. They don't need an entire hour and that much effort to focus, to meditate on Hashem. So it all depends on the individual. As it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, and I will quote it to you from the Shulchan Aruch. Ksheitbonen Adam, when a person focuses on how the great king, the king of all kings, Asher maleh kol haaretz kivodo, how he fills the entire universe, how this king, Omed Alav, is there overseeing every action that we do. Vero'eh b'ma'asav, and he knows of our deeds. Miyad yagia elav hayirah. So by contemplating about this, he will immediately come to some level of yirah, fear of Hashem. However, there are those nefashot that are more shefelot. We've explained a little bit about them in the past. They're from a lower world. They're from the lower levels of Olam HaAsiyah, the world called Asiyah, which is the lowest of the worlds. So this kind of nefesh on its own will not be awakened so easily to strive to want that which is divine, unless it applies itself, unless it makes a lot of efforts to do so. Especially, he says, if the tum'ah of chatat ne'orim is there, if the impurity of the sins of the youth are there. A lot of people may not know what this means. Chatat ne'orim is especially critical for men who may have succumbed to the evil inclination when they were young and single. We talk about wasting seed. And this brings tum'ah. This brings a certain level of impurity. So the impurity is there, especially this type of impurity. This can stand in the way. Because avonot mavdilim, as we've explained. Avonot, sins, are always going to be barriers, always going to separate us from Hashem, which means that prayers are not heard. Our actions are not going to make as much an impression as they could otherwise, because there's still baggage, there's still debts that have to be paid. You know, here we're trying so hard, and we don't realize that there's some things that have to be taken care of, resolved, before they pay attention to us. So that's what it means, davonot are mavdilim. So if you have a soul that is a low soul, and you have avonot mavdilim too, and you have sins too, it's even more difficult for him to connect to Hashem. He will never be excited about it. He will feel it's a burden. And people don't know why. Why is this individual not interested? Well, first of all, it could be that his nefesh is really a lower soul. It requires a lot more work to convince him. Don't give up. Don't think it's a lost case. Never do that. But what's really, really bad is when a person does not take any action to correct his mistakes, the avonot, the sins. Then it's completely his fault. In other words, he may have the potential, just like anyone does, to make a connection to Hashem, but as a result of his actions, his misdeeds in the past, they're standing in the way. So a person has to first remove those debts. As the rabbi tells you, cannot go into the mikveh, to a ritual bath, holding a dead animal that is unclean. Tovel v'sheretz beyado, going into the mikveh holding. Let go first of the sheretz, of the unclean animal, and then go into the mikveh. But if a person continues with the tumah in him, then how will he ever connect? It's never going to be a strong connection. You have to first purify yourself. So here, still, even though he's behind, even though the nefesh may be low, bekoshi ubechoska, if he does work hard, biyigi'ah, to think about the greatness of Hashem from time to time, Bevadai, he says, for sure, he will come at some point to yir'at ata'ah, to that low level of yir'ah, which is what the rabbis mean, yagati umatzati ta'amin. If somebody tells you, I worked hard and Baruch Hashem, I succeeded, you can believe him, because if you work hard, you may get somewhere. If you don't work hard, you won't just discover something on your own. No, when we're talking about spiritual levels, it won't just come to you. So to say I was able to get there without too much effort, I don't believe it. You can find money in the street without too much effort, that yes, but spiritual levels require work. It's not possible for one to say, okay, I have it, I got it, by not applying myself so much. No. By the way, some people are gifted. They have a photographic memory. That's something else. That's already a gift, Mishamayim. We're not talking about that either. We're talking about Yirat Hashem, the fear of Hashem. We're talking about the connection to Hashem, Avodat Hashem, the service of Hashem. Spiritual levels, which everyone is capable of, but a lot will depend on how much effort they apply. And that is what is meant by the pasuk, Im tevaksheno kesef, that Mishlei Solomon speaks about. If you just search for knowledge, for connecting to Hashem, in the same way you search for a treasure, in other words, if you know there's a treasure there, you know underground there's a treasure, you know how many people will work so hard to get it? You know what they do sometimes at sea? They hire sophisticated equipment, they get whatever they can from boats, machinery, people, to help them find this sunken treasure that's very deep in the water, that everybody else pretty much gave up hope on it. But today, with better equipment, people invest in this, and they have found a lot of gold and a lot of treasure. But you know what they're willing to do for some coins that shine? To them, this is important. Money. You're going to become rich. Look how much effort people are willing to make. Lechapes matmonim, to look for treasure. Have you ever seen those metal detectors?
Yeah.
In England, they have a lot of people going around with metal detectors in the fields, because maybe other places too, because they have found in the past in those places.
Also.
Yeah, the beach. Well, the beach is usually garbage. I don't know how much money they're going to find there, or treasures. But there are some places in the world where through the metal detectors they're able to find old coins and the like.
Maybe jewelry.
Jewelry, yeah. So people go to great efforts to get their hands on money. If you would search for the knowledge of Hashem in the same way you search for that, you will find it. You will be helped by Hashem to find it as well. So he says that's how much one needs to apply himself to reveal that treasure of Yirat Shamayim, or fear of heaven, that is really concealed in the heart of every one of us. This is the natural fear that we've been thinking about many times in the Tanya, that there is a natural fear that is concealed in the heart, but it needs to be revealed. And that's what his next question is all about. This natural fear of Hashem that is concealed, he says, this is a level of fear that it's lema'ala me'azman, it's above time. It's always there, it's constant there. It is natural to us, we inherited it. If that's the case, if it's always there, we inherited it, then why do we have to work hard? If something is there already, that we received from Avotenu, from our forefathers, then why work hard? Good question, right? That's where he's leading. That's the next point that he wants to make. This chapter, by the way, is a little bit longer than the average chapter, so we're going to split it into two. Just cover another point or two, and leave the rest for next week. But this is a very good question. He's been telling us in the previous chapters that there is a yirah musteret belev kol yehudi. There is a certain concealed love, a love that is inherited, that we have naturally, and this comes out in the time of need. Many, many Jews who were not too knowledgeable of Torah were prepared to give their life. Even if it meant, just bow down to this idol, make believe. You're not converting, I'm not forcing you to convert, just make believe. I'm not going to even make believe. Where does he take the courage to do that? You know, there are incredible stories of what people did. Have you ever heard of the story of Rashi's father, who was a jeweler, and the king wanted to buy from him a very, very special jewel that may have been many, many carats. And Rashi's father, who at the time was childless, agreed to go with the representatives of the king. As they were riding in a boat, in a river, they told him where this jewel is going to go. It's going to go on the head of an idol. And the head of an idol, this jewel of mine, no way in the world, for any money I will not sell it. And they begged him, they tried to force him, and he threw it into the water. He gave up this tremendous fortune so that it should not go to the head of the idol. This made such an impression by Shamayim in heaven that they say that as a result of him giving away this fortune, we will bless him with a greater fortune, a soul that will illuminate all of Jewry through his commentaries. Rashi. Rashi was born into this individual as a result of his mesirut nefesh, his self-sacrifice. So look, there are many stories like this of people willing to give up everything. Where is this from? That yir'ah, that ahavat Hashem that they have concealed in their heart. They may not have been too knowledgeable, but they were tmimim. They were sincere in their faith, very, very committed to it. It's only in the past really 200 years that a lot of Jews unfortunately became assimilated as a result of the times. But the good news is that even so, in the end of days, which is already more our generation, many of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will come back and do teshuvah. So you're seeing a tremendous teshuvah movement. How? Hashem promised it will happen, but it still requires free will. And that free will, every Jew has. But it's not just a free will. It's the yir'ah that is mesuteret. It's the concealed fear and love for Hashem that is there, that is awakening. In order for that to be awakened, of course, Hashem helps. Hashem sometimes sends a message in a dream or some other way to shake up people. And you may never know. It could just happen one day out of nowhere that one receives a message. It could be in a dream or while one is awake. Hashem is letting you know something. It happened to me now in Israel too. I was wondering to myself, why did I have to go so far? Even though Baruch Hashem I went for a grandson, I stayed for 2 weddings, so I had really many reasons to be there. But I have already been there before, not too long ago. Did I really have to come just for this? Was that so important? I'm sure there must be some other reason. And sure enough, something happened. Another time I will probably, I'll try to explain what it was. Something happened in the Kotel that shook me up a little bit. That had I not been in Israel, I would never have known or realized it. So I said, could it be that just for this? Yeah, it could be. Just for that alone, it was worth it. Because I would never have figured out or thought about it. Something that requires, effort to correct, to improve. We all need to, from time to time, think of ways of improving certain things that require teshuvah or require just more effort. And as a result of some incident, and later through a dream as well, a combination of the two, it came to my mind that perhaps this was a very, very strong message. So here we see that it is possible for every Jew to awaken that concealed love, that concealed fear that he has. Just that a certain amount of effort needs to be made, depending on his neshama. And how does one do it? Through the constant idbonenut, the constant meditation in Hashem, by thinking of the greatness of Hashem, how Hashem is aware of him, how he examines his deeds. And the question was, if it's there naturally, why have to work hard? Since the working hard is necessary because you need to reveal it. It is really dormant. If you don't reveal it in the open, you don't bring it out, it's not going to help you too much. You need to bring it out from just a machshava, from a thought, and think about it constantly in your mind. It's not enough that it's there. One has to think about it. One has to bring it out into the open. How do you do that? By meditating. It says, without some effort applied, it's going to be dormant. It's not going to really do that much. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, it's there, okay. Occasionally, he may be put to test and challenged, and he may do well. But on a regular basis, how is this individual going to hold himself back from doing averot and doing the mitzvot? There's sun merah ve'aseh tov, right? This is a constant challenge that we have on a daily basis, staying away from that which is wrong and doing that which is right. What's going to give him the encouragement, the strength to be able to do that which is right and stay away from that which is wrong? Unless that fear of Hashem that is concealed is revealed and he's aware of it. Just to be concealed there is not enough to prevent him from getting into trouble. It's not strong enough. That is why we need to work on it. That is why effort is required. Yes, it's there, but you have to bring it out into the open. You've got to do something to bring it up. You have a beautiful plant in your garden. Don't you have to water it unless you have rain all the time? It's just things don't happen by themselves in the physical world. They require some human intervention. Unless you're talking about rain, perhaps, the things that Hashem does all the time, without human beings getting involved. But for the most part, there are many, many things that require human intervention. That which is spiritual is a must. Human intervention is a must. You don't just get anywhere, spiritually speaking, just by itself, automatically. Effort is required, so even though the quality of yirah is there concealed, it has to be brought out in the open. In other words, to be able to do something b'machshava, dibur, ma'aseh, through all our faculties of thought, speech, and deed, we have to be continuously aware of this yirat Hashem. And that awareness comes from bringing it out into the open, revealing it. And what are we revealing? We're revealing the fact that Hashem tzofeh, mevin, mabit, bochen, that Hashem is continuously examining our deeds, aware of our deeds. Like the rabbis tell us, listen, if you want to avoid sin, you want to know the best recipe for that? Istakel b'shlosha dvarim, v'yata ba lidei avera, dama lemala mimcha, ayin ro'a, ozen shoma, v'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim. If you want to stay away from trouble, there's several things that you can think about that will help you, that will humble you. Remember, somebody's above you, watching you. All your deeds are being documented and recorded. There's an eye that sees. And when we talk about Hashem that He sees, He says, and He doesn't have the mutaguf. He's not seeing with physical eyes. In other words, the more so, He doesn't need physical eyes. He knows everything. Everything is revealed before Him. It's just a mashal that we use. He says the Chachmei Kabbalah also talk a little bit about this, that when we use these terms for Hashem, it's not that He has this, Chaz v'shalom. Hashem is not physical. We're trying to describe something to us humans that we can understand. To calm our ears, in other words, to be able to, for us to perceive what exactly is going on in the upper world. So we borrow human terms. Hashem sees. What does it mean Hashem sees? So it's not exactly the way we see that Hashem sees. So he goes on to explain. For example, the human body can sense heat or cold in all its limbs. It even senses its limbs and organs. That's because even though the nefesh is spiritual, this nefesh is in a physical body. So therefore it is able to experience all these physical sensations. Even, he says, the fingernails of the toes, if it's burnt. And everything that we sense and experience travels to our brain. So we are aware of what has happened to us. But this is not a good example. Of course, it's not the best example or ideal example to compare our sensations and experiences to Hashem. As he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything that happens in this world, in the upper worlds and the lower worlds. And that is only because as a result that everything is coming from Him. as it says, כי ממך הכל. וגם כל היצור לא נכחד ממך. In other words, nothing is concealed from Hashem. And as the Rambam says, he says, that בדיעת עצמו כביכול יודע כל הנבראים הנמצאים ממיתת הימצאו. Hashem knows, so to say, of all the creatures that are created because they are from Him. So He's completely aware of them because they all come from Him. So even though we are using the expressions that we are familiar with, it doesn't mean that this is exactly how He sees things. His way of seeing things or knowing things is completely different from us because everything comes from Him. It says the nefesh ha'adam, even the nefesh ha'sichlit, in other words, even that which is divine in us, mitpa'elet, it is impressed by everything that happens to its body because it is dressed up in a physical body. HaKadosh Baruch Hu eno mitpa'el. He's not in any way affected by any changes or any events that happen in this world. There's never a change in Him. It says, even though certain philosophers and Chachamim may have described or explained the difference between the two, he ends up over here that Am Yisrael, we are Ma'aminim B'nei Ma'aminim, we are believers, descendants of believers. We don't even need to philosophize or investigate or explore this any further. Because we know that Hashem has been around forever before the world was created, and nothing that has changed in this world has affected Him, because no changes affect Him. This is how he ends this last point over here, that even though we're talking about Hashem knowing and seeing things, don't think for a moment that He knows and sees the way we think and see, the way we know. No. His knowledge and Him are all one. It's all one thing. By us, it's two or three separate things. He, of course, created the whole world, and as a result of all the creations coming from Him, it's all part of Him. So He's continuously aware of everything in this world. We just borrow these terms, these descriptions, in order for us to better understand and to relate to it, that Hashem is fully aware. We know what that means, because we can relate to this concept of awareness and knowledge in our terms, in our way. That's all it means. But we should not think for a moment that there's any comparison between His knowledge or His vision, so to say, in human vision. Very, very, very different. Just that we had to use this kind of an analogy so that we should become impressed just a little bit, that in the same way we can know things, Hashem, for sure. As the Chafetz Chaim said when the first record players came out, you see, we can record our own voice. You don't think Hashem has a better machine to record our voice? We can take pictures. You don't think Hashem has a better camera to take pictures of us? Today we have computers and hard drive. You don't think there's a better hard drive upstairs that is not erased? So these are incredible pieces of technology that today can help us understand that if we can make these machines to record and to see from a distance satellites, to read the license plate on a car from such a distance, you don't think Hashem can do that? Think for a moment. Think about these things. That's what he's saying. Not that he sees the same way as we do, but if we can do it, for sure he can do it. This is the type of itbonenut, he says, that is necessary in part to be able to develop Zat Hashem, that Yirat Hashem.